Hi, I'm Zack Swader. If there's two things that I hold dear to my heart, that's auto racing and video games. Of course, put those two games together right there and you have a racing video game and I am hooked for life. But if there's one thing that I have known since I was a little kid, the heritage of auto racing and cars in general have been something to behold. You lose sight of the history of where everything started from. And that's exactly what I'm going to be showing you as I welcome you to this new channel as we go through the history of motorsports, particularly Formula One. Let's take a look, guys.
What you're looking at here is the Maserati 250F. This here is a Formula One racing car back from 1954 by the Italian auto company Maserati. Now, if you're wondering, yes, this doesn't look like modern Formula One cars. Well, that's because it isn't. Well, these things were death traps, so to speak. This generation of Formula One cars were just out of this world. But you wouldn't think that they would be so deadly because of how much lack of horsepower that this 250 had.
Now, this particular 250F only has 270 horsepower. In those days, compared to today, that's absolutely nothing. I mean, if you were to show up nowadays with 270 horsepower to a modern Formula One race, you'd be laughed out of the paddock. Let alone if you'll actually get it into the track. Like 270. What? And see, the thing is with these cars back in the 50s as well, they had these huge steering wheels compared to even later on down the road in the 60s. But what really amazes me is because they needed the leverage in order to be able to steer these things. I mean, having a steering wheel like this nowadays, there just wouldn't be any room at all. If you were to take and have one of these, it's just the amount of space that's in front of you. There's just no room at all. But the fact that they sat on the cars back then, let alone in the cars like they do, well, the revolutionary times of the 1960s with the Lotus 49, you needed this type of thing. Racing was so much different back in the day, and there's very little people that still would be able to drive one of these things nowadays. It's just fantastic, and one of those guys that made this car very famous was some Argentinian known as Juan Manuel Fangio.
Juan Manuel Fangio, born on June 24th, 1911, was an Argentine racing car driver. He dominated the first decade of Formula One racing, winning the World Drivers' Championship 5 times. He abandoned his studies to pursue auto mechanics in 1938, and he debuted in Turismo Carretera, competing in a Ford V8. Now, the Carretera, I assume, is some Argentine NASCAR back in the day, so to speak. In 1947 and 1949, he went to Europe where he competed in Formula One, and thus where he achieved further success. Winning the World Drivers' Championship 5 times, he earned the nickname El Maestro because of his dominance. Of course, that record was beaten 46 years later by some German named Michael Schumacher. Fangio raced with 4 different teams: Alfa Romeo, Ferrari, Mercedes-Benz, and of course, what we're talking in the video, the Maserati team, which he raced the 250F. He holds the highest winning percentage in Formula One at 46.15%, winning 24 of 52 Formula One races he entered, which I don't even think Lewis Hamilton has that kind of record. Of course, he was kidnapped once before a Grand Prix race, which is kind of interesting, but he later turned up okay. What had happened was, Fulgencio Bautista of Cuba established a non-Formula One Cuban Grand Prix in Havana of 1957. Fangio won that event and had set fast times during practice and qualifying. In 1958, on February the 23rd, 2 gunmen of Fidel Castro's 26th of July movement entered the Hotel Lincoln in Havana and kidnapped Fangio, and Bautista ordered the race to continue as usual while a crack team of police hunted down the kidnapper. Fangio was taken to 3 separate houses. His captors allowed him to listen to the race via radio, and also bring in a television for him to witness reports of a disastrous crash after the race concluded. In the 3rd house, Fangio was allowed his own bedroom, but became convinced that a guard was standing outside of the bedroom door at all times. The captors talked about their revolutionary program, which Fangio had not wished to speak about, as he did not have any interest in politics. He later said, "Well, this is one more adventure. If what the rebels did was in a good cause, then I, as an Argentine, accept it." He was released after 29 hours after being treated very, very well. The captors' motives were to force the cancellation of the race in an attempt to embarrass the Batista regime. After Fangio was handed over to the Argentine embassy soon after the race, many Cubans were convinced that Batista was losing his power because he failed to track the captors down. I don't remember the last time a Formula 1 driver has ever been kidnapped in order to be able to do something like this, especially for Fidel Castro, so to speak, but hey, it's the 1950s. Things were different back then.
And the first time Maserati raced the 250F was indeed the 1954 Argentine Grand Prix, which of course is Juan Manuel Fangio's home race, basically. And for him to be able to drive a car like this in his home Grand Prix in 1954, that's got to be astounding. I mean, a legendary driver with a legendary car, the first time, and it's his home Grand Prix? He probably didn't get a wink of sleep the night before. So guys, here I got to show you a legendary car driven by a legendary driver in the name of Juan Manuel Fangio. Now with this channel, I'm going to give you just a little bit of an information of what I'm going to be doing with this channel. It's obviously going to be racing content, and it's obviously going to be featuring some of the quite well-known video games that have revolved around racing, just like I did this video using the Assetto Corsa. But what I plan on doing here is to just enjoy motorsports for what it is. Give you guys a little bit of a history of some of the most famous people in Formula 1, mainly because Formula 1 is obviously my most favorite motorsport in the entire world. So obviously I kind of want to share with you guys the history of the drivers, the cars that were used, the teams. I cannot wait to be working on this project, and I hope this, I hope you guys really type of enjoy this thing. But, I want to also take my time with these videos because I do want to make them look good. I know this one is probably going to be rough looking, and I apologize if it's a little rough. It's okay, we'll get there. But that's kind of why I want to take my time a little bit. So thank you guys for watching this video of the Maserati 250F and Juan Manuel Fangio. And what I'm going to be doing for the first few episodes is talking about some of the more historical, I would say, top figures of history of Formula 1. The next one, obviously, I'm debating if it's going to be Stirling Moss or Jim Clark. Not exactly sure which one to do first. But I am kind of going through era to era, so expect one of those two guys. Probably Jim Clark, because I think Juan Manuel Fangio was a bit more of an influence compared to Stirling Moss. And I think Stirling Moss isn't that great of a legendary driver. I mean, my God, he is a fantastic driver, but I think I may just do something kind of like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, into the 90s. You get what I'm saying here. But anyway, enough rambling, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more and keep up with this little project that I'm working on. But yeah, welcome to my channel, guys. Happy racing, and I'll see you on the track.